Hello, Satnam. It's me, Shakti Sundari, and back with you today for hopefully a quick little message. But I couldn't resist doing a message today because I'm so loving doing these. Today's message, owning your desire. I'm still speaking and reading from Daniel Odier's book, Desire, the Tantric Path to Awakening, and just offering some commentary around that. So, owning your desire. I've spoken in one of the earlier videos about how we tend to project our desire onto others rather than owning our desire. And the bit that I'm reading today and talking about kind of builds upon that redefinition of desire from a tantric perspective, so that it becomes something that, rather than enslaving us, liberates us, rather than something that we feel guilty about and we try to repress, actually expands and opens us to bliss in every moment. So you know, in the traditional old-fashioned religious way of thinking, desire was seen as something bad, to be repressed, to be cut off from, that would lead to sin. And then what happens is a couple of things. People who cut off their desire, which is actually everywhere, in everything, naturally, it's like the life force is desire. When we try to repress that and stop it, so a couple of things happen. One is that we feel less alive, surprise, surprise. We may literally look and act as if we are dull and we have no life force within us, you know, like shrunken, sunken bodies and lifeless, and like this, I'm trying to embody it, you know, gosh, my body just wants to slump when I lose my desire. And or distortions then happen, because what happens when you try to push something down that is naturally there, well, it's going to kind of try and find another outlet, right? Because you can't repress life. Desire is the most natural thing, and if you try to make it sinful or bad or put it into the shadows and pretend it's not there, it will express itself, but in a very unhealthy way. And that is why there has been so much abuse and sexual shadow that's happened in religious institutions, where the whole idea of celibacy has been touted about. Well, it's not natural. You know, I know there is an argument about celibacy on the tantric pathway, and that's different to the kind of stuff that I'm talking about right now. That also explains other kinds of sexual violence. You know, when we try to repress something, make it wrong, sinful, bad, dirty, it will express itself in an unhealthy, unnatural, potentially dangerous way. And in fact, I would argue that repressed desire in some ways actually relates to violence in terms of warfare. So there you go, that's my argument. That's actually not what Daniel Odier himself says, that's just me. So what Daniel Odier argues and speaks about here in this bit I'm going to read from today, desire and its object, is that rather than projecting our desire and that feeling that we get, and it's not just sexual, and I have to keep emphasizing that. So he's not just talking about genital desire, he's speaking about it in much broader terms. Rather than projecting it out onto another and obsessing about one person, for example, or one object that we really, really desire, and then actually contracting ourselves around that so much that we stop feeling good. It doesn't feel good when we project our desire onto another and we don't get that object, right? Or we get the object and then the desire goes away, and then we still go back into the cycle of desiring again. So it's not like there's an ultimate sense of fulfillment. What he's actually arguing is that, and this is what the Tantras speak about, is that we feel the desire and we allow it and we embrace it and we meet it and we own it, and we allow it to expand out to meet all of life, so it doesn't become focused on one single thing. So one is we own it, it's ours. I mean, it's not ours really, it's the energy of life, but we own it within our own bodies. It's not the responsibility of any other. and we don't focus it just on one object to claim it. We feel it instead and allow it to rise within our being, and that takes us in a far more expanded, blissful state. And at the same time, there's also a reconfiguration, or a different perspective in terms of thinking about the object as desiring us. And I'm not in that case thinking in terms of, like, you know, if you fancy someone, thinking that they fancy you back. That's not what I mean. What I mean is, if where's my glass of water? If you have a glass of water, that you imagine that this glass of water desires you as much as you desire it, and then see how that changes the moment of sipping that water and swallowing it and taking it into your body. So it's that we're talking about. So let me read and see if anything else bubbles up to be said. Okay. Desire is one of our life forces. To deny desire, or to want to cut it off, is to deprive ourselves of an incomparable dynamic. It is to head towards becoming dried up and drained of life, the mark of so many of the religious. Religious means bound. What better bond than desire? And then he goes on to say, look, you know, we pretend that we don't desire. We think it's good, in inverted commas, not to desire. But actually, the desire for God is the desire. The desire to renounce desire is itself a desire. It's therefore impossible to follow a spiritual or mystical path while eradicating desire. For Tantrikas, desire is the mark of the endless creativity of consciousness. In cutting it off, we cut off an important part of our consciousness. That's key. So then he talks about, I'm not going to read this whole chapter, but there's so much in it which is like brilliant. He talks about how we project a desire onto an object. What do we really desire? We can readily believe, and this corresponds in general to our fragmented experience of the world, that we desire to possess people or objects. Hence, listen to this, we go through the world as predators, seeking to appropriate for ourselves everything our desire can touch. After a short time, you know, think about how that's behind the obsessive materialism of the Western world that doesn't really satisfy anybody, does it? After a short time, we realize that we are dissatisfied, and this mechanism of truncated desire pushes us unceasingly to desire more objects in an endless cycle that eventually gives way to frustration. Makes sense? What if desire were to desire something other than objects? Now, here's the answer. If desire were simply the incandescence that gives us the feeling of being alive, were intensity, were the tremoring vibration that carries us, then it would be absurd to allow it to be consumed by objects. And to lose it once we possess the object, of course you can't really possess anything in that sense, or realize we cannot attain it. This profound movement is life itself, and this tremoring is the one that all yoginis and yogis experience precisely because they remain in incandescence of desire without rendering it dependent upon the object. In this instant, objects are seen as maintaining incandescence and not as reducing it. So the objects that we think we want to possess, we actually are grateful for their presence in our lives because they give rise to that feeling of desire within us. And actually, if we expand our viewpoint and our perspective, everything around us can give rise to that feeling of incandescence within us. And rather than like shooting it out to grab, we keep it here and we feel it and allow it to merge and subsume our entire being. In the Tantric sadhana, which means spiritual practice, there is a particular practice where the yogi sees the entire world as desire, everything, a leaf falling from a tree, the sky, the snow, the water he drinks, his food, desires him or her. In this way, he enters into an extremely subtle and refined relationship with objects. We do not touch in the same way a teacup that desires us. We do not look in the same way at a tree that desires us, because each contact with reality becomes a celebration of the universality of desire. Fixation on a single object thus ceases to exist. Isn't that amazing? You miss one person and the whole world seems empty of people. Haven't you had that experience where you kind of, you fancy someone and you begin to obsess about them, and then all of a sudden it's all about that person, and have they responded to your text messages and your emails? Meanwhile, while they're not responding to your desire, and you begin to sort of feel badly about that, there's a whole world all around you of desire waiting to be met. The beauty of nature, the animals, the trees, the food, the clothes, all of it's there, and all of a sudden you've blinded yourself to it. The obstacle to our continual satisfaction is that we reduce our desire instead of allowing it to blossom out over all objects. This is key. I've missed my bit now. Oh yeah, a reduced desire blocks the fluidity of consciousness, sensations, thoughts, and emotions. Have you ever noticed that when you become fixated on something, an object or a person, suddenly the movement of life through you becomes stunted, blocked, reduced. You're no longer free flowing with life. When a single object takes an exclusive place in our mind, when our being reaches towards this object in a sort of contracted tension, movement ceases within us and suffering finds its home in us. I can give you an example of that. The other night I was out dancing, and I love dancing so much. It's like absolutely my passion. And there was a beautiful man on the dance floor, and he met me in the dance, and it was so exquisite and so beautiful. Like I was in heaven. Nothing sexual. This is just dancing and being met fully in my energy. So his energy was meeting my energy, and I love that so much. And I love the polarity of masculine and feminine meeting. And as I say, this is not about sex or sex. It's just about the flow of life meeting masculine and feminine, and energy meeting energy in the dance, which is my passion. But then what happened was that I did begin to feel desire, and the desire awakened in me, and I did begin to transfer that on happening in me. And then what happened is when he went off to dance with somebody else, I felt like for a little while in my body, I felt like the sadness of the letting go of that, and it took me a little while to allow it. Nothing wrong with that, but I just noticed it, to then kind of reconfigure and allow that feeling to move through me, to come back to, of course, the joy of being in my dance, like what I was going to meet next, whether it was a person, whether it was some divine moment in my own self-expression, whatever it was. But for a moment I was lost to that, because I had fixated a little bit on him as the object of my desire. And in fact, it's not him, it's me, and it's desire, which is life, which is everywhere. So that's just one kind of real life example of that. When our desire occupies all of space, the absence of one object goes totally unnoticed, because the flow of our awareness remains free to come into contact with thousands of others. And now I just want to say, this doesn't mean it's kind of suggesting that we go around in a sexual free-for-all. That's not what this means. This is the way Tantrikas live, in constant presence to the whole of reality. In constant presence to the whole of reality. Now, if we just sit and absorb those words and feel them, in constant presence to the whole of reality, like I can just feel myself expanding out and beginning to feel so much exquisite pleasure in my body. I almost want to burst, So this is how Tantrikas live. They are thus incessantly showered by the world's infinite variety. They no longer have to seize, stifle objects. They leave them free. And the contract they have with the world is of such richness that lack, frustration, or solitude never comes and finds its home in them. How can you be alone when there is this constant feeling of self-fulfillment from within? The incandescence of the desire that burns from its own indistinguishable fire, because it's infinite, life is infinite, is what makes the Tantrika's gaze shine so brilliantly. Now, someone told me the other day, I don't know if they were just trying to chat me up or not, that I have that shine. Maybe I do. I think I do sometimes. What makes them perpetually in love with reality, what makes them so alive, so tremoring, whereas all the while they consume nothing, or almost. Ba-ba! Oh, it's really weird that this light stream thing is making my nose look red. So funny. All right, my loves, I must go. I hope you have enjoyed this transmission and this reading and this commentary. If you have, and if you've got something to add or say, please do, please comment below. I shall look forward to reading your comments. If you like this and what I'm talking about, have a look at my website. I always go www.shaktisundari.com, where I talk about my online courses, Awakening Your Ecstatic Potential, which take you deeper into how to live this way. I also do one-to-ones, and yeah, thank you for sharing. Thank you for being with me. Thank you for joining me. Owning our desire. So much love. Satnam. See you again tomorrow.